Welcome to Season 10 of the Parenting Aces podcast, part of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we've got another great episode for you this week. We are going to be talking with Coach Bill Patton. I'll tell you a little bit about Bill in just a moment for those of you new to the podcast and may not have heard him before on this show. But before I bring Bill on and give you that little background info on him, I want to just remind you, if you haven't become a premium member of Parenting Aces yet, we'd love to have you on board. You can just go to parentingaces.com and click on the link. Also, we've got our merch online, so we'd love for you to, go shopping. Oh my goodness, I've got a little frog in my throat. Sorry about that. We'd love for you to go shopping on the website, buy some of our cool merch. We've got hats and shirts and tanks and all with our cool new logo. So rock the Parenting Aces garb and take your pride out there. So let me give you a little bit of info on Coach Bill Patton. He is a lifetime USTA member. He's a senior contributor to Sports Ed TV, part of the leadership group behind the Winning Summit, which is an online summit, coaching summit for all sorts of things having to do with junior tennis, collegiate tennis, tennis development, professional tennis, et cetera, et cetera. He's also behind the Evolutionary Sports Collective. Bill's got his hands in everything. He has been a certified tennis professional. I think he has kind of let that one go, but he and I co-authored a book, and Bill has authored several other books, all of which are available on Amazon, on our website under our books links. So hope you'll take a look for all of those. And this week, Bill and I are going to be talking about all kinds of stuff around junior tennis. There is no junior tennis conversation without addressing cheating, of course, especially when Bill's on, because one of the things that Bill specializes in is visual training. And I always love hearing his perspective on the difficulties and challenges that young players have calling balls correctly on the tennis court. So without further ado, let me unmute Bill. Let me add him to the shot. For those of you listening to this, I hope you'll check out the video version on our website and on our YouTube channel. Bill, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you, Lisa? It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. We've scheduled this and rescheduled this, and vacations have come into play, and COVID, and God knows what else. But glad to have you, and so glad we could finally make this work.
It's a pleasure to be here. Hey, I'll trade you a book for a t-shirt.
Oh, you got it.
Okay, deal.
Yeah, yep. You got it.
She was vulnerable. I mean, how is she going to say no? Anyway.
Hey, any opportunity for somebody to rock the Parenting Aces garb, I'm up for it. You'll have to just email me your mailing address and I will get that off to you.
All right, vice versa.
Yep. Perfect. So tell us what's going on in the world of Bill Patton. I see you everywhere. You're doing a Monday morning radio show. You're doing all kinds of stuff these days.
Yeah. Well, people live with this false belief that somehow I'm busy all the time, but they haven't seen me laying on the couch. So,
well, there's a lot that you can do laying on the couch these days.
Well, okay, there's that too. So, well, all right. What's currently happening right now is I'm getting more deeply involved in researching neuroscience, which is a baby science. It's really brand new, the in-depth study of the brain. And so much is still not understood. So it's a pretty daunting thing to get into. But that's kind of a big emphasis right now. I am currently editing the complete guide to coaching team tennis that I created with David Smith. And also just finished publishing the 4th edition of Visual Training for Tennis.
Awesome.
And so that just came out in May. So I'm right now I'm sort of touring a little bit and doing some book signings and all that, and trying to be on as many podcasts to talk about it as possible. So thank you for the opportunity.
Glad to be a stop on your media tour.
Oh, yes. So it's and then I get to sit on my couch while I do this. So
see,
that's important, right?
There you go.
In a moment, I'm going to be like that.
You can be very productive from the couch. I have learned that. I think we've all learned that well during COVID. So talk to us a little bit. I mentioned in the intro that you can't have a conversation about junior tennis without talking about cheating, and cheating and visual training for you go hand in hand, because I think the whole prevalence of cheating in junior tennis may have led you to kind of look into this whole notion of how people see the ball and training how people see the ball and see the lines and all of those things. So maybe give us a little bit of your story around that.
Yeah, no, it's funny because I hadn't thought about it that way until just now, but I guess there's some credence to that. So let's start with a story, and I don't want to talk too long about cheating because it gets emotional, and so I am not emotional about cheating. It's a problem, and I solve problems, and so I would encourage everyone to be a problem solver. So when you throw your hands up in the air and say it's an unsolvable problem, then you just made it permanent. So be a problem solver. So here's an interesting story. I was tournament director. I was watching this one particular match, and is a young boy, and his dad is Eastern European. I found out later they're from Bosnia. And, dad's pretty gruff and all that. But, a decent guy, nice guy. And his son's playing, and the son proceeds to make at least 9 bad calls in the match.
Oof.
9, at least 9, right? So I'm watching this match with great curiosity, and I can't coach the other player to get a lines person. That's not in my purview, but I'm watching and waiting and waiting and waiting. And the other kid never calls for a lines person. But I was studying this kid. I was watching him very closely because mostly what cheaters do is right after they make the bad call, they avoid all eye contact with everyone, right? You see them go through this transformation of a lack of transparency. They don't want to look at anybody because they don't want to see who saw. Right? So this kid did not have that. He had no guile, right? So I'm like, what's going on here with this kid? And I'm looking over at the dad, and every time the kid makes a bad call, the dad sort of winces. And I'm like, okay, well, dad's not on board with this. So, what exactly is going on here, right? So the match is over, and the he's very pleasant. He's very pleasant. He's very enthusiastic. He says nice shot to his opponent when the opponent makes a nice shot. So after the match, I went to the dad and I said, "Hey, can we have a chat for a moment after the match, after your son comes off and reports his score?" And he says, and he's like, he thinks he's in trouble, right? So I pulled him aside and I said, "Sir, I think you've done an amazing job. Your son just looks like a really delightful boy and all that. But I saw you looking very uncomfortable when he made some errors with his calls, which I think we both saw, right? So will you do me a favor and take him to go see the eye doctor, right?" And that runs counter to what we normally do. We just label the kid a cheater, and now he's a cheater from now on, and all we want to do is see him punished. Yeah. That's all. Yeah. Just punish him, right? Throw him out. So anyway, a couple months, and then the dad's, looking confused, and he's, wasn't ready for this conversation, and I didn't think it went really well. But it's a couple months later, and I'm at a tournament with my juniors, and all of a sudden the dad's running up to me really fast, and I'm bracing myself because I don't know what's about to happen. I'm ready to possibly fight. Okay, so no, I mean, I don't start them, but I will continue them anyway. So he runs up to me, and then he says, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. I took my son to the eye doctor. It turns out he needs glasses. Now he plays with contacts, and he's playing better."
Wow.
Right? So that's throwing one starfish back into the sea. Right? Yep. So if we do it that way, if we go, all right, one at a time, we will, go on a case-by-case basis, figure out what's going on there and deal with it, then we can solve it. My book is called, how to end cheating in junior tennis, 21 ways to eat the elephant.
Yeah.
Right? Because we're going to do it one bite at a time. And essentially it comes down to this. And I think this is what people lack. They lack moral courage. They lack the ability to stand up and say, this is a problem and we're going to deal with it and we're going to do it right now. Right. And so my tournaments became known as tournaments where cheating didn't happen as much. And many times I got this compliment from parents. It was so nice to know that the people who won deserve to win.
That's a nice compliment.
Well, and so, but then I became a pariah in my section because I pissed off the wrong people, because the powerful political people were also cheaters.
Mm.
And so then after a while, I had to stop running tournaments because I was running the gauntlet. I was a target for criticism, and people would make up accusations for me to defend myself against. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, fold. I'm just going to go someplace else and do something else. So, but
the nice thing, Bill, the nice thing now is we have alternatives, right? We have all sorts of ways for kids to compete in our sport that don't solely revolve around the governing body. There are still opportunities through the governing body, but then there are opportunities elsewhere as well that sometimes are a lot better opportunities for these kids to become their best tennis self.
Yes. Well, and yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, and this is not the highest levels. I mean, I ran open level tournaments in NorCal. So, decent level players who are on their way up, but not national level events. But in my experience, 80% of the bad calls that are made are simply mistakes. Mm-hmm. It's just hard to see a ball going 80 miles an hour that way, when your head's turning and it's very close to the line. So simple mistake.
Right.
About 15% of the mistakes are because someone's feeling so much pressure from their parents or their coach or whatever that they're psychologically blinded. Their brain lies to them. Mm. They mean well, but their eyes lie to them, and it tells them what they want to hear. Yeah. And then about 1 in 20 is criminal because their coach told them that if it's break point and the ball's on the line, you take it.
Yeah.
So I think the percentage is probably different at higher levels events, but but
I want to just ask you, because you talk about the fact that you were running events for kids that were on their way up. They weren't national level players. This is the bunch of the tennis playing population right now that really seems to be left out of the mix. And so, I'm hoping that people that are watching or listening to this are hearing this. The fact that you were running events for that mid-range player, these are the players that typically tend to become lifelong players, who tend to introduce their children to the sport, who tend to introduce their friends and partners to the sport. And we need them. We need to keep them engaged. And right now, at the national governing body, those are the players who are being kept out of competitive play. And so again, thankfully, we have lots of alternatives available now. And part of my challenge with Parenting Aces is making sure people know about these alternatives, that, there are chances for their kids to continue to compete and grow and develop and love the game.
Yeah. So I will make this offer. Anyone who wants to consult with how to solve this problem in their area, whether they're a sectional representative or a tournament director or an influential parent, I will consult with you about first steps to start making things go the other way. And I will say this, that so many kids drop out of junior tennis because there are what 60,000 junior tennis players, or maybe declining,
Declining.
but there are 340,000 high school tennis players and
Right.
growing. So that's where they end up. And then it's funny how in a team situation the cheating aspect can be mitigated much more easily because there is an onus placed on getting real lines people on there for the remainder of the match.
Well, and also there's peer pressure amongst your teammates, right? So there are lots of people holding you accountable for those calls.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so you offered this consultation. I want to just say, check out the show notes to those of you watching or listening. We'll have links to contact Bill in the show notes via email, phone. I'm not sure what he's going to share with us, but make sure you check out the show notes for that contact info.
Moral courage.
There you go. I love that term, actually, moral courage. And, I want to go back to your story for 1 second, because listening to it, and it's not the first time I've heard that story from you, but listening to it, one thing that crops into my head is you said the dad was standing there watching and wincing every time his son would make a bad call. But what you didn't say is whether anybody intervened and how the opponent was handling the bad calls. And so can you just quickly talk about what you feel the parent's role is when they're standing courtside seeing their child making these bad calls?
Well, first I want to make another comment, because I did run other tournaments that were not USTA tournaments where I was free to do as I wish. And there was a time that I went out on the court and I spoke directly to a player in between points. And I said, "Get it together.
Yeah.
Your father has given me permission to come speak to you. Get it together now, or you will be penalized." And that's not something you could do in a USTA event. And the kid made a turnaround and ended up winning the tournament. And then we were able to praise him for his remarkable growth. But anyway, it's hard. And I've been the parent, and I've been the pissed off parent. I've been the furious parent, right? Whose kid's being cheated. And you go and you inform, the tournament desk that there's a problem on a court, and they don't come.
Because it's not our role as parents to report it.
They don't come.
The kids have to ask.
And then eventually the roving umpire gets there, and you go, "Hey, take a look right there," right?
Yeah.
And then, they go on the court for 2 games and they don't see anything. And so they just presume that everything's okay. So that is the antithesis of moral courage. Yeah. Now, what we did at our tournaments is this. I had teenagers as court roving monitors on court with walkie-talkies. They would see one bad call and they would call me immediately. And then I would go to that court.
Yeah.
And they had permission to look at the player that had made the bad call and continue looking at them.
Which, is tricky too, because it can be interpreted as intimidation. And
looking is just looking. They weren't to scowl at them. They weren't to stare at them. They were just to look at them. And it's amazing what that did to curtail cheating. Yeah. And then a nonverbal message is sent. Wait a minute, I just made a bad call, and 3 minutes later, the tournament director's watching my match.
Yeah. Yeah. But again, getting back to what the parent's role is in that situation, I think, because this is Parenting Aces.
Right. Well, I would say, number one, you really need to be calm, cool, and collected. You have to accept the current state as it is today, because when you go to the tournament, then you have to accept the way they're running it at that moment. But then after they fail, then what you really ought to do is write a very good letter. So I would say first step would be go to the desk, inform them that there's a problem on a court. Would they please look, right? If they fail to do that, right? Then that's going to become part of the letter that you write.
Except I'm talking about the parent of the kid making the bad calls. I'm talking about the dad you were referring to who would wince every time he would see his son make a bad call. What is his role? What's his responsibility in the moment?
I think that that's interesting because I think just unfortunately the current situation is that we're just not very mindful about this stuff at all. It's just the status quo.
But we need to talk about it. We need to become mindful because there are parents who have said, I yanked my kid off the court when they did stuff like that. And I've said often, I wish I had listened to my husband and yanked our kid off the court, not for cheating. That wasn't his thing, but it was more the temper.
Right.
But but the rules do not allow the parents to get involved at all.
Well, see, that's where moral courage comes in. So why we wrote rules that were ineffective because we lacked the moral courage to do the right thing. Right? So in these non-USTA events, I went to this parent and I said, "You see how your son's acting?" And the parent said, "Do whatever you want within reason." And I said, "Okay, trust me, I will." Yeah. So what they did is they legislated themselves away from courage. They now don't have to do anything. So I would say that parent of that kid, there are any number of strategies that you can use. You can film their matches and show them back to them later and say, "Look, that ball was in, that ball was in, that ball was in." And, and say, "I feel embarrassed when you make incorrect calls. This is not how we play." And as a high school coach, I have made it very firm that with my players, we're going to play fair, even if the other team doesn't. Because what they're telling you when they cheat is that they don't think they're good enough to beat you fairly. So they will succumb to their own cheating. And we will do better by playing fair because we will play from confidence. So, I think it's really important to take the long view of the character development of the players because now, see, there's this culture that's been developed where, that player's good, so you must not teach them any character skills because that will sidetrack their playing level.
Yeah, what's that about?
No, and it's deeply ingrained, and I've heard this from officials above me. "Oh, so-and-so is a good player." I'm like, "Well, but they cheat like hell, so I don't care."
Yeah.
Right? So, but they're going nowhere because they will be exposed, and when they can't cheat to win anymore, their game's going to implode. So, I wonder why we're not developing as many great players these days. It's because we're driving away kids with good character, and we're promoting the ones with bad character.
Interesting. Because
they're good, and so no, not really.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I know we said we weren't going to spend a lot of time on cheating, and now we're 23 minutes in, and that's all we've talked about.
We'll fly through the rest of it.
Okay, good. Let's fly through the rest of it. So